That's you too.
Good afternoon, everyone. Judy Maggio with KLRU's Decibel. I'm here with Mayor Adler. It's hard to know when we're on live because the camera's there and it could be on at any time. We are going to be talking today about the topic that I think has been front and center, I know in your world, and a lot of people have been discussing in town, and that's homelessness. So, first of all, I want, in your words, for everyone to understand why the council made the changes that it did, why you and the council decided to revise the rules on public camping and panhandling.
Well, I think you have a council and a community that is really serious about doing something about homelessness. Not as many cities have done, Los Angeles and Seattle, taking kind of half measures that basically hide the challenge rather than deal with it. We know that policies that have us just moving homelessness around our city from one public place to another public place to another public place ultimately does not help us deal with the homelessness challenge. So in June, what we said to the manager is, let's stop spending millions of taxpayer dollars moving people from one public place to another public place. Let's actually get serious about housing people that are homeless, experiencing homelessness. Let's also start coming up with a list of places where people cannot camp, sit, and lie. And let's have a relationship between, as we provide housing, there are more places we can say that people cannot camp, sit, and lie. So we're in the middle of that process right now, and I'm looking for us moving forward. I think we're doing what we're doing because we've watched what's happened in other cities, and they basically wait too long to actually get serious about the homelessness challenge they have. You know, Austin's in a pretty good place right now. Our homeless count went up by 4% last year. The national average was 5%. Dallas went up 9%. A city like Seattle with 200,000 fewer people than us has 6 times as many people experiencing homelessness. Los Angeles, 40,000 folks experiencing homelessness. Austin, 2,255. We have a challenge we ought to be able to take care of.
In the process of trying to take care of this challenge and changing the rules, so there's been a lot of public backlash, particularly with people involved in tourism and the downtown business owners. It's my understanding that there are some irons in the fire, so to speak, that are looking at perhaps changing it again a little bit, limiting some of the places where people can do public camping.
Well, that's what we said we wanted to do in June. So in June, we indicated to the community and to the city manager that we expected him to come back in August so that we could start identifying reasonable restrictions and allowances for people to be able to be in our city. So I recognize there are a lot of people that are reacting just to half of what we did in June. But in June we said that in August we wanted to start talking about places where we would restrict and prohibit camping in our city. But we want to do it as part of a broader conversation about actually providing housing. I think that what we need in this community is an agreement we make with ourselves, a social compact in our city, that we are willing, in fact, to provide more housing. When we provide more housing, then we have places for people to go. I mean, the problem we have is that if all I do is prohibit camping in the city, then our police walk up to someone who's experiencing homelessness. They say, you can't be here. You have to leave, and if you don't leave, we're gonna issue you a ticket or arrest you. So they say, you know, fine, officer. She starts gathering her stuff up, and she says, please, officer, don't arrest me or ticket me. And as she gathers her stuff up, she looks and says, where do you want me to go? We don't have an answer to that question. So wherever she gets up and goes, she's going to be violating the law. It's inhumane to be chasing people from place to place to place. We have to do better than that.
Here's the conversation, though, that I'm hearing around town. People come up and ask my opinion and things. I can't give you an opinion, I'm a journalist, but what they tell me is they'll say, you know, I'm a very progressive person, but I do not support what the council has done with homelessness. what do you say to those people? And also, were you surprised by the polarization and backlash? Because, you know, I've covered news in this town a long time, and rarely has an issue really caused this much polarization and divisiveness, other than environmental issues and things like that.
I think the people that are coming to me that don't understand the action think that what the council did was approve camping anywhere in the city because we thought it was okay for people to camp anywhere in the city. That's not the truth. We don't think that anybody should be camping anywhere in our city. The question is, how do you effectively get to a place where you do not have people camping in your city? And no, I am not surprised by the angst in the community, because this is not new. We did not create any new people experiencing homelessness in June. For the last several years, I've been involved in conversations all over this city at neighborhood association meetings, with Onion Creek near Slaughter Lane overpass at I-35 where there's a camp, with the folks in South Austin near Ben White and Pack Saddle. I mean, we're talking about communities that are at their wits' end, that are talking to me with fire in their eyes, that are demanding action. And the best we could offer those people is, well, we can send the police over and they'll get them to move. Of course, when they move from under the overpass at Slaughter and I-35, they could just be moving to the underpass at Ben White and Pack Saddle. I have another neighborhood association there, and we could send the police in to move them, and they'll move maybe back to Slaughter Lane at I-35 or one of the other places. And at some point you look up and you say, I am tired of doing that. I will not do that anymore. That this is a community that is better than that. When I went out to Los Angeles and Seattle, and I know those mayors well, and I've talked to them all the time, but I went out there and I asked them, because they have, as we talked about a second ago, much greater challenges than we have. And I said, what do you wish you had done in your city 8 years ago to avoid being where you are? And they both looked at me and they said, I wish that the fervor and intent and will in this community to do something about homelessness as it exists today had existed 8 years ago. Because if we had acted 8 years ago, we might have been able to actually do something before the scale of our challenge has gotten so great. They talked about implementing the same kind of laws we had, which make people feel good for just the moment. A business owner calls up and says, there's a person experiencing homelessness outside my store. They call up the police show up, the police get that person to move. The business owner feels good because the person's not there. The police officer feels good because they want to help people and they were able to help. But all that person did was go somewhere else. And the police are going to get called there. So I hear the angst. But the angst is people that think that the council thinks it's okay for people to camp anywhere, when quite the opposite is true. This is how we stop camping in our city. We have people, you know, people are more visible today, perhaps, than they were 2 months ago, but the numbers haven't gone up. Part of what we have is, you know, if you had 15 people sleeping under an overpass on a bedroll kind of stuck up in the corners, you really didn't notice them. We now have good Samaritans in our community that are out giving everyone tents in our community so that they have a safer, better place to live. And when you have 15 people now under that overpass in a tent, it becomes that much more visible. Well, I understand the visibility issue, and certainly it's getting a lot more people engaged in the conversation. That wasn't the intent to do that, but it's resulted in that. And I really feel that in this community we have now reached the place in a city that I love because of the people that live here, that we have a community that is in fact ready to do what it takes. We have people in our community that are only concerned about people. Only concerned about the people that are experiencing homelessness. We have people in our community that are only concerned about places. Most of us are concerned about both, and we're probably in different places along that spectrum. The wonderful thing about this challenge is, I don't care if you're concerned about people or places or where you are, there is only one answer. We have to put people in homes.
So that brings me to the shelter issue. couple of things. I know that one of the goals is to have a shelter in all 10 districts. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it makes sense for us all over the city to participate in resolving this challenge.
But so far, like the South Austin folks who are very upset about the Bannister, I guess Bannister Lane and area shelter, the building that the city purchased. I have a feeling that this is going to be one of those not in my backyard issues. It's like, yeah, we want to do something about homelessness, but having a shelter in your neighborhood is not going to be a real popular thing.
Well, and I think that the people who are living in the area of that proposed shelter legitimately are concerned, because the only real shelter they have to point to see what one looks like is the arch downtown, and we are not doing right by the arch downtown. So when we talked about opening up, one, we have to fix the arch and what's happening on the outside of that.
The rules there are changing.
Right, and we have to change the rules on the outside as well. But the rules that we're going to establish in shelters that we open, like the one in South Austin, are rules that will prohibit camping, sitting and lying on the exterior of those. They're not going to be drop-in facilities. You only get to go in that facility by referral by a social service agency, or maybe our law enforcement personnel. We're going to be limiting the number of beds in these locations. So that facility will be unlike anything that we've seen. And what I tell people in that community is, when that opens, I will meet the neighbors out there weekly to look at that facility, so that if it's not happening the way that we expect it to, I will be there with them at that location. But people talk now about Alan Graham and Mobile Loaves and Fishes and
Community First Village is a wonderful place.
Do you know how many years it took him to be able to locate that? Almost 5 years. Almost 5 years.
And it's outside the city limits because he had trouble locating it inside the city limits.
We can't wait 5 years.
Yeah.
Our challenge is too great. And if we're going to deal with this challenge while it is still at a scale where we can, in Los Angeles, 40,000 people experiencing homelessness. We have 2,255. We ought to be able to do something. It's a much different problem.
It's a manageable problem at this point. And I know the council I know that the city manager has put quite a bit of money, $17 million more, I think, than last year in the budget. Yeah. What about the people, though, like this guy named Shannon, who I met, who was camping out on South Congress, or just, actually, it's right down on Congress. And he said to me, I have been homeless since I was 17 years old, and I'm 47 years old, and I have no desire to be in any kind of shelter. The interesting thing that happened while we were standing there was a member of the host team came up and asked him about his medications, how he was doing, what he needed. But, the owners of the businesses around there say Shannon is now doing some things around the property that make it unsavory a bit, like going to the bathroom and things like that. It might have been not happening because they were not in public as much on public spaces. So what about those people who don't want to go into shelter? What can the city do for them? Is there a place they could go?
Well, what we know is that it's a really small segment of the
chronically
community,
homeless.
And even among chronically homeless folks that are experiencing chronic homelessness, the number is actually pretty small for people that won't go into a shelter. But most of those people that say they're not going to go into the shelter say they don't want to go into a shelter for sometimes some pretty good reasons. I mean, we have shelter availability in this city where if you want to go in, the rules say you have to show up in the afternoon, and if there are too many people that want to go there, you have to participate in a lottery. Mm-hmm. So you go there, maybe you get in, maybe you don't get in. If you don't get in, then I guess you're walking the streets again. If you do get in, then you're sleeping on a mat surrounded by lots of other people that are sleeping on a mat. And the experience is all too frequently that people lose in that environment their possessions that get stolen from them while they're sleeping. So that's uncomfortable. And then next morning, somebody wakes you up way too early in the morning to send you back outside so they can clean the place. I mean, if I was experiencing homelessness and my choice was to go through an experience like that or sleep in a tent under an overpass where I knew at 2 o'clock in the afternoon where I was going to spend that night and my things were in my tent and they were safe and no one was waking me up next morning, I would choose my tent too. So the question is, I have to, as a community, we have to provide a reasonable choice for people. I was at some facilities in other cities that have no barrier homes, where they admit people who are addicts, they admit people who have significant issues. These are people that are not going to want to go through an 11-point program. I mean, they've done that, they've been there, they're not going to do it again, and if that's the condition on getting a home, they're going to tell you they don't want to do it. But if you say, hey, tell you what, it's a safer, better place, just go in there. Just go in. We're not going to condone drug use. You're not supposed to bring it in, but no one looks in the room. No one follows her when she goes out during the day. She does walk past the counter. There's an opportunity to get her meds and medication that she might not otherwise get.
And probably I hope mental health counseling. I mean, I'm sure there are the wraparound services would be on.
Absolutely. And what you find even with those folks, they end up using less, they end up in EMS less, they end up in jails less, they end up in fights less. It's a better, safer place. And you're not expecting those people to suddenly realize they want to be somewhere else and they turn their lives around. I understand it does happen and you celebrate every time it happens, but that's not the goal. So we need a continuum of care. There are some people that will tell you that they don't want to leave the streets. It is a really, really small number, and we have to provide every opportunity for those folks to get off the street.
So I know we're running out of time, but I want to talk about next steps because, you know, as you said, the vote that was taken in June was all-encompassing. You know, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but with the expectation that then you come back and revisit it in August. And I know that you've had a lot of meetings with stakeholders, including the Downtown Austin Alliance, the Greater Crime Commission, the police department. So what is the next step? What's going to happen next?
I think that what's going to happen next is that the council is going to move forward, hopefully to engage the community generally in that community agreement we make with ourselves, that social compact. That says that as we identify more and more places for people to be, we are going to immediately start identifying places where people cannot camp, that are not the best and safest place for people to be.
Would this be like entertainment district or high tourism areas, or what would be the criteria for that?
I think that's the kind of a conversation we should have, but we could say that high pedestrian trafficked streets are not the best place for people to camp. We could say in floodplains and around creeks might not be the best place, and we could say that next to schools or child care where there are children. We could say that in transit stops or bus stations. I'm sure we're going to say anywhere near a shelter so that we can demonstrate to the community that you can have a facility like that that's not disruptive to neighborhoods. But I think that probably real soon could be today.
Well, you can go ahead and announce it now. I mean, why not?
I think that really soon.
Okay.
There are going to be council members that lay something out. I think that everyone on council wants to be part of this conversation. Right. This is probably something that's not going to happen with 2 or 3 council members going off and doing it. It's probably going to happen in front of everybody's eyes on the bulletin board that we have, because everybody is concerned about this. But the important thing to remember, no one wants anyone camping in this city. It is inhumane. And the council's action in June was the first step, but with the identified next step of beginning to identify places people can't camp. But if we're going to do that as a community, we have to be able to answer her question when she's gathering her stuff up and she says, okay, I'll comply, don't arrest me, I'll move, where do you want me to go? We have to be able to answer that question.
Mayor, I know that there are many changes ahead and that this is not the end-all on homelessness, but we appreciate you giving us an update on where we are as a city and where we may be going next. So thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
And thank you all for joining us this afternoon on Decibel Dialogue, and we'll continue to cover homelessness for the month of August, culminating in a half-hour special at the end of the month on KLRU. Thanks so much. Make it a good day out there.